One of our volunteers.
Do they go up? Can you do that? Felipe, is it going up? Yep. Oh, no, absolutely. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Testify.
It's just a 1, 2, 1, 2 testing. Can you hear me?
All right, good morning, everybody. We're just about ready to get started. If you can filter in, sit down, grab a Danish, grab a coffee, grab a water. We will get started in just a moment. We have, how many people do we have on the Zoom?
67.
Last I checked, it was 60, over 60. Can the Zoom folks hear us okay? It's confab over by the server.
Yeah, they said.
Here, all right. All right, Zoom folks can hear, in-person folks can hear? All right, wonderful. Well, great for what, welcome, everybody. Welcome to this briefing on public trees and urban forests. My name is Steve Owens. I'm state representative for the 29th Middlesex District, which is most of Watertown and parts of West and North Cambridge. I will be hosting this morning. Happy belated Arbor Day to everybody. Did anybody get out to plant a tree this past weekend?
I did.
People, pretty good, pretty good. They say the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today, right? So everybody after this meeting, gonna go make an effort, I'm sure. But that's what we're here for. We're here to enable advocate for two bills. One bill that would plant more trees in our urban forests, and another bill that would help maintain and protect them. So I really appreciate your everybody coming out today. We got a great turnout in the room, and I think we've got, last I heard, over 60 people on Zoom. So thank you everybody for spending your morning with us. I want to thank especially my co-filers for these bills. Senator Cindy Cream will be here, is running a little bit late, running into some traffic, but she will hopefully be here by the end of the meeting. And we will hear from my co-filer for the urban municipal reforestation bill, Rep. Jenny Armini, shortly. So one thing that we know that climate change is the biggest challenge facing the health of our planet. We know that it is coming. We know that we're basically baked in for 1.5 degrees increase. We're working to prevent 2, but we are basically have to prepare for 1.5. And trees are a proven, affordable, natural way that can be implemented quickly to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. We talk about carbon storage. We have a very natural, very efficient carbon storage system in trees and forests. A mature tree will absorb more than 48 pounds of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in a year, and one large tree can provide a day's supply of oxygen for around 4 people, depending on the tree and where it's planted. But more than that, trees play a critical role in creating a healthier, safer, more connected communities. They filter our air and water, and they provide climate resiliency. We know that we're going to have more serious storms, more higher temperatures, bigger as climate change, as we deal with the impacts of climate change. Trees will provide shade, cool our cities by up to 10 degrees. That can help with heat-prevented deaths in urban areas. And trees lower our surface and air temperatures, not just by providing shade. Shaded surfaces, of course, will 20, 45 degrees cooler than peak temperatures for unshaded materials. But street trees in particular, they keep asphalt and sidewalks cool, and that combats the urban heat island effect. Carefully positioned trees can save energy and lower our household energy consumption for heating and cooling by around 25%. And a computer model devised by the U.S. Department of Energy, they predict that proper placement of just 3 trees, can save an average household between $100 and $250 in energy costs every year. Roadside trees also reduce nearby indoor air pollution by more than 50%, according to a study out of the UK. In Baltimore, a 10% increase in tree canopy corresponded to a 12% decrease in crime. Trees are not just a way that we can reduce our impact in climate change, but they're a community benefit in so many other ways. Every dollar spent on planting and caring for a community tree yields benefits that are 2 to 5 times that investment. Benefits that include cleaner air, lower energy costs, improved water quality and stormwater control, and increased property values. So I really thank you for coming here to talk about trees. We all care about trees, and I want to introduce my co-filer, Representative Jenny Armini.
Hi, everyone. It is a joy to be here with you today. I would like to thank Senator Crean and Rep. Owens. This bill was filed last session by my predecessor, Lori Ehrlich. So I would also like to thank her. She and I both represent she did represent the 8th Essex District, which is Marblehead, Swampscott, and Lynn. Now, I am sure you all know this book. This was a popular book in my house with my kids growing up. And the story here is about the tree giving life to the young boy through the course of his life. The many different things the tree gave to him that enabled him to thrive throughout the course of his life. And that's exactly why we're here today, because that's what trees do for us. And we know, though, that it's not as simple as a branch here and a leaf there. And, as you may remember in the story, he gets down to the stump, and as an old man, he sits on the stump and rests. As Rep. Owens just went through, the benefits of trees to our lives, our day-to-day lives, it's so unbelievable. I'm not going to go through it all again, but we, very simply, we can't live without it. And this book was written without them. This book was written in 1964. And I remember as a kid growing up in Brooklyn that the environmental movement was just kind of getting going. And it used to be, you'd hear about tree huggers, and trees were niceties, right? That's how I think broader society interpreted trees. Trees were niceties, but we now know that trees are necessities, not niceties. And it's so important that we are all here to fight for them. I recently met with some folks in Swampscott, and they told me that from 2010 to 2016, the town of Swampscott has lost 110 acres of trees. And that is unbelievable. We cut down 15 billion trees every year, 8 billion. So, like I said, the work we are all doing here today collectively is so important. One of the other things that I love about this issue, honestly, is I'll call it the intersectionality of trees. This is an issue that no matter where you live, no matter how much you have in your bank account, no matter what your situation, trees are incredibly important to your day-to-day life. And so this is actually an issue where we can all come together and we can bring different groups that may not be used to working together. We can bring them together and fight for trees because of the universal benefits they provide. So I want to thank everyone here today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I'm also looking forward to continuing on fighting for this legislation.
Hey, thank you. So I do appreciate you bringing the giving tree. I very nearly brought a copy of Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. And the reason why I did that, I nearly did, couldn't quite find it on the in the house, unfortunately, with two boys running around. Those books sometimes end up in places unexpected. But the reason I almost brought that is because we have with us someone who was described very recently in the media, it was the Globe, right? As Boston area's own Lorax, speaking for the trees, David Meshoulam. David is most importantly one of my constituents, but also is the founder of Speak for the Trees, and he has been really a powerhouse on getting people interested in planting trees, getting teens in Watertown planting trees, and I don't think that there's a tree in town that he hasn't been involved with in some way. So I really appreciate his advocacy and your time here today. And I will pass it over to you to talk about the municipal reforestation program. Thank you.
the mouse, the clicker here, you know?
Where's LIS?
Is this it?
Oh, where's this at? This.
No, keyboard.
I will improvise. So, for those of you who are sitting at home, I just want to acknowledge here, there's some beautiful photographs in the back of this room that acknowledge the native land on which we stand, native to the Mi'kmaq, the Massachusetts and the Wampanoag people. And the work that we do at our organization, for the Trees, is the work that I hope part of this bill will do, is to recognize the centuries of colonization and effect it's had on the land and the people who have stewarded it, and the important role that trees have played in those communities, both in terms of sustenance, but also in terms of connection to space. So whenever we're ready, try again. Bear with us. Well, I'll just start here because I think right now, oh, there we go. Okay. So are you controlling it? Okay, thank you. So we go back to the first slide if you don't mind. So good morning and welcome everyone, both here and on Zoom. Thank you for joining us. And I wanted to give a special thank you to Senator Green, Rep. Owens, and Rep. Armani for the leader, or Mimi, sorry. For your leadership and vision for this bill, the Municipal Reforestation Act. And I saw my own Rep. Owens was out on Friday planting trees in honor of Arbor Day, as were many of us that speak for the trees. And I know that each of you has a deep commitment to not only the environment, but to environmental justice and to ensuring that future generations of Massachusetts residents will live in healthy, green, and vibrant communities. So, like Rep. Owens said, my name is Meshoulam, and thank you for pronouncing both those names correctly. I am Executive Director of Speak for the Trees Boston, and we are a nonprofit committed to growing Boston's tree canopy in areas where trees are most needed. We are here because so many of us love and appreciate trees. But more importantly, we are here because we know, as the representative said, that trees provide enormous benefits and value to our communities, especially communities most vulnerable to the effects of climate change, namely things like heat island and polluted air. Across the country, trees, especially urban trees, are no longer viewed as just a nice to have, but rather a must have. With this bill, Massachusetts takes the lead in the field in ensuring that every resident receives the benefits of trees. So if you could, next slide, please. Oh, we are there. Thank you. All right. So we are proud to share with you the reasons why this bill, and my dear friend and colleague Marilyn will explain the details of the bill, and I'll explain the overview of why it's important. Why this bill, an act establishing the Municipal Reforestation Program, is so critical. It will improve the lives of millions of Massachusetts residents by cooling and cleaning our air, by reducing stormwater runoff, and by improving the mental and physical health for all. Residents who live in urban areas, and that's more than 90% of residents of the Commonwealth, will face the most severe consequences of climate change. The expansion of our urban forests across the state will help us in mitigating many of these effects. Next slide. So we know, I mean, we all know this, right? But the cause of climate change is an increase in large part to increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide to levels never seen before. This leads to things like hotter temperatures across the country. Last summer, if you remember, was one of the hottest and driest on record. And the future holds much of the same, not only here in Massachusetts, but across the country. Since the late 1800s, global temperatures have risen an average of 2.2 degrees Fahrenheit. And 9 of the top 10 warmest years on record in the US have occurred since 1998. Next slide. We are also seeing increased air pollution, especially in urban areas. And as we continue to burn fossil fuels, we are increasing particulate matter in the air that enters our lungs and causes asthma, increases morbidity, especially for some of our most vulnerable residents. And we saw this, and we continue to see it, how communities with higher asthma rates had higher mortality rates from COVID. The harmful effects of air pollution only increase as temperatures rise. Next slide. Trees, we know, help mitigate these harmful effects. They cool, as Rep. Owen said, hot city streets by providing shade and through what's known as evapotranspiration. So they're just really big community-wide air conditioners. They absorb pollution and they do so much more, including reducing stress, improving learning, and strengthening community. Yet, as this slide shows, urban canopy is declining every year, felled by development, under threat from new pests and a changing climate, and due to decades of underinvestment. This is true across the country from Florida to California. Next slide. And we see this in Massachusetts as well. Massachusetts is one of 23 states that had statistically significant urban tree decline between the years of 2009 to 2014. Many municipalities already facing tight budgets are unable to maintain, let alone grow, their urban tree canopy. From Springfield to New Bedford, from Pittsfield to Boston, communities are losing trees faster than they can replace them. Next slide. And it comes as no surprise that residents in some of the poorest communities have some of the lowest tree canopies. Higher urban tree canopy is associated with higher income. This is no accident. Researchers have demonstrated how redlining from decades past can be seen in green lines across our community. This green inequity further exacerbates public health and economic inequities. For example, as Rep. Owens mentioned, residents who can least afford air conditioning often live in the hottest areas where it is most needed. Next slide. We also recognize, however, and this bill takes this into account, that each municipality is starting at a different place in terms of its tree canopy and might have a different natural landscape or geography or governance or history or built environment. Each city and town, while recognizing the value that trees provide, faces its own unique challenges and opportunities. Next slide. So we have here population density on the next slide. And as you would expect, you find the fewest trees in high density neighborhoods where trees can make the biggest difference in building healthy community. With maximum pressure for development and tight space for trees, these trees are often treated as an afterthought. Next slide. Even in dense urban areas, take Pittsfield on the left versus Dorchester on the right, and that's where our offices are located. There's a stark difference between the size and spread of the canopy. We can and must do better to ensure that tree deserts across the state have the resources they need to expand and grow their tree canopy to meet the needs of their residents. So last slide, please. Finally, I'd like to close by acknowledging that Massachusetts has already set an ambitious goal to reach net zero by 2050. That includes common sense measures like increases in renewable energy sources for our grid, improved energy efficiency, and a transition off fossil fuels. But these approaches alone won't get us there. We must have a comprehensive approach that includes nature's oldest and best green technology, trees. We must invest in green infrastructure. It is a tool that will help us reach net zero target by reducing energy usage and capturing carbon. And it is a critical part of growing healthier, more resilient communities. Thank you. So it's my honor to introduce Marilyn Ray Smith. She will share with us the inner workings of this bill. She's been instrumental in leadership role on thinking through how this bill will be most effective. Marilyn Ray Smith.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Morning. Welcome to those in the room and to those of you who are on Zoom. I want to again thank our wonderful representative Owens and Representative Armini for years. We were colleagues back in the day, and the different life for both of us.
Marilyn was my boss.
Anyway, I just want to thank you for your leadership, and also Senator Payne is not with us, but she's been amazing. She's my senator. She's just
Closer to the mic.
okay.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate the outpouring of support that this bill is receiving. We're here to ask for co-sponsors for the bill, and we're confident that it's going to have a successful journey through the legislature. We think this is a year tree. So I represent the Emerald Necklace Conservancy on the Gas Transition Alliance, which is a network of organizations working together to stop burning gas to heat our homes and businesses. Also a member of Brooklyn Mother Delta. I, like so many, my energy for this work is powered by the outrage at the thousands of street trees across the Commonwealth whose roots have been suffocated by methane coming from gas leaks. That's how a lot of us got here. Advocates for trees and advocates for clean energy share a commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to mitigate the harmful effects of climate change for all living things. But together, we support the Municipal Reforestation Act. This is more than a tree bill. This is a climate survival bill. Every day we hear, I think we're going to advance these slides. Maybe that's good. Okay. Every day we hear about threats to the environment, not just to humans, but also to the plants and animals with whom we share planet Earth. Every day we see extreme weather in some part of the globe brought by climate change. Sometimes we feel frustrated and helpless in the face of impending disasters, both those in front of us and those predicted by the end of the century. But there is something that we can all do that will make a profound difference, and that is to plant trees in our own community. Trees are the best and cheapest way to address a long list of existing challenges made worse by climate change. Here's a quote from the first paragraph of Peter Wallenberg's new book. He wrote The Hidden Life of Trees. So I urge you to go out and get this. The Power of Trees, How Ancient Forests Can Save Us If We Let Them. That's the name of the book. So the first sentence in this book says the future of forests and the future of humanity are inextricably intertwined. Trees are our best option for removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, doing so much more efficiently than any technological fix that we can ever come up with. This is the urgent mission of the Municipal Reforestation Act. The act sets up the structure. We can, yeah, this is that's right. The access of the structure to provide funding and technical assistance for cities and towns to establish robust urban forests. All municipalities must participate except those with both fewer than 10,000 residents and a tree canopy cover of at least 60%. Small towns having a strong urban forest can still opt into the program upon approval of their legislative board. The act has flexibility so that each city and town can develop a plan that meets this particular needs. And it provides for an urban forest advisory council with experts to provide technical assistance on optimal sites for planting, guidelines, making sure the trees survive. The program builds on the success of the Greening the Gateway Cities program, administered by the Energy and Environmental Affairs and the Department of Conservation and Recreation. They planted more than 30,000 trees in more than 20 cities in the last decade. The bill has, next one. So the next one. The bill has 6 primary goals. One is to strengthen climate resilience against heat waves, drought, and floods. You've already heard we get shade in summer, they break wind in the winter, the roots retain storm water. They pull carbon from the atmosphere. We should not be choosing between mature trees and solar panels in our efforts to address climate change. We need both. Trees are an essential part of the Commonwealth's carbon sequestration strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. 2, the bill includes trees and transportation projects. Trees along roadways calm traffic. They encourage drivers to slow down. They promote livable streets. Trees at bus stops and transit stations protect commuters from sun and rain, making public transportation more attractive. Trees break up the monotony of asphalt and concrete and the urban landscape. How many of you take a slower route just so you can go down the road that has trees on it? That was my friends. Okay, so the third is expand. I think we go to the next slide. Yeah, we're good. Expand urban forest and environmental justice neighborhoods. It's not hard to find tree deserts. All you have to do is just drive around any town. You'll observe that trees are often sparse in low-income neighborhoods, while they're prevalent in wealthier neighborhoods. And of course, none of these slides has illustrated that disparity quite vividly. I have said that this is a tree bill and a climate bill. It's also an environmental justice bill. Okay. 4, provide funding for urban communities to expand tree canopy cover. For decades, cities and towns have lost many thousands of street trees to the hazards of urban, not just from gas leaks, but from air pollution, road salt, soil compaction, just plain neglect. Many cities and towns have already undertaken projects to expand the tree canopy cover. Many here today are the leaders of their communities. Boston, Cambridge, Brookline have master plans, Arlington, Salem, Springfield, Summerville, Chelsea, and many others. I could name lots and lots of cities here. Have tree committees, which are making a big difference. However, many environmental justice communities have not had the resources either to replace the trees they've lost or to plant new trees in the first place. The reforestation program makes sure that these communities with low tree canopy cover have access to financial and technical assistance to develop tree planting plans. 5, the bill provides resources to preserve the health of newly planted trees. Planting a tree is very gratifying, but putting a tree in the ground is just the first step. It's essential to make sure that the tree gets watered regularly, it's monitored for disease, and it's pruned when necessary. 6, the bill sets an ambitious target of 60% tree canopy for all our cities and towns. The first priority for funding goes to sites with less than 20% tree canopy cover and sites with high levels of air pollution, sites with heat islands, and sites in EJ neighborhoods. The second priority for funding goes to sites with less than 40% tree canopy cover, and the third goes to sites with less than 60% tree canopy cover. And to achieve this, trees may be planted in public rights of way and in public parks. They may also be planted on private property as long as the owners agree to water and maintain the trees. Planting and preserving trees on private property is essential to getting sufficient critical mass to make a difference in the canopy. There are at least 5 reasons why this is so. 1, tree branches need to touch each other to get the full benefit of the canopy. 2, in a city neighborhood, there's often more available space than private property to plant trees in the front yard or even the backyard than along the street. 3, planting a tree in a yard is easier and cheaper because it's not necessary to break up the sidewalk to dig the tree pit. 4, the resident has convenient access to water, avoiding the necessity for the city to cart water around in a truck, tree to tree. 5, the tree will get individual attention, caring resident who takes pleasure and pride in watching the tree grow and thrive. Aware of these reasons, the Green and Gateway City program planted 2/3 of its trees on private property, engaging residents in the choice of the trees. In many cities, the biggest loss of trees is from private development, as you've heard, not from municipal inaction or action. Widespread community commitment to the urban forest can encourage requirements to minimize tree loss. Cities and towns can require developers to design plans that avoid cutting down mature trees and to include a robust tree canopy cover right from the start, not after a bitter and costly fight with the local community that so often occurs today. And I know there's so many of you engaged in it because I get your emails every day, about 100. I know it's a fierce battle going on out there. But I don't think we have to choose between mature trees and affordable housing. We need both. Residents of affordable housing want trees as much as the rest of us. We shouldn't be sacrificing mature trees. They're not dispensable. It takes decades to replace mature trees to get the benefits as have been described to you earlier. To accommodate this ambitious vision, cities and towns must develop comprehensive plans. They include conducting a tree inventory, locating optimal sites where trees will reduce heat islands, retain stormwater, and plan for long-term maintenance, including water. Cities and towns can also work together, as well as with regional planning agencies to develop plans, keeping costs down and minimizing staffing constraints. Speaking of costs, what would the program pay for? Eligible costs include buying trees, especially native trees, trees that attract pollinators, insects, and birds, and trees from local nurseries where available. It includes modifying infrastructure, including renting machinery, hiring workers, including training them, maintaining new and existing trees. It's very important to preserve the trees we have as well as plant new ones, and also to cover reasonable administrative expenses. The technical assistance that come from the Urban Forest Advisory Council, full of experts like local tree wardens and landscape architects and tree planting organizations and so on. And its advice is going to include how do you determine the optimal tree cover, tree maintenance guidelines, and collecting data. It can also give model laws for tree protection to be shared among cities and towns. A lot of people.
Oh, you did it. Rob, I'm gonna go out,
Also, a
great
critical
to buy
component,
a cookie.
I've already
His
said
name is Brian.
climate bill, environmental justice bill. There's also a job bill.
Good time to go.
Program jobs and experience of
Anything you want?
program. Work crews are recruited from local communities and trained for forestry skills. Many move on to jobs in landscaping, tree care industry.
I
So
don't know if that's really ready for prime time. I might,
Money will come. from a
I think
variety
it's gonna be more of
state
base.
appropriations. Slides.
Well, that's.
Environmental bond bills as well as federal
No, I
grants,
mean-
private grants, and even donations, all administered by existing
We
reforestation.
have some, okay.
Advisory council and
Saving
EPA
this
will work
body.
together to set up a formula that's based on road mileage, employment rate, EJ criteria, and percentage of tree.
Oh, okay.
So the results are going to be many. It's had an economic impact to support local nurseries and tree care industry, create jobs, community engagement, and how to care for trees, better quality of life for urban residents. And most important, it's carbon sequestration to help us in our long-term goals of net zero. Cities and towns of the Commonwealth want trees. What they need is leadership at the state level, technical advice to plant the right tree in the right place at the right time. Which I learned from my friend here, Tom Brady. First lesson he taught me. Funding and flexibility to meet unique needs of their community. It will take at least a decade for newly planted trees to begin delivering shade, clean air, and other climate benefits. And I'm just going to repeat what Rev. Owens already said, the Chinese proverb. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is right now. Massachusetts is proud to be a national leader. Let's seize the urgency of the moment and be the first state in the nation to have a statewide, not a citywide, a statewide urban forest program. So citizens and representatives in the room and your aides, please co-sponsor and support our state bill together.
Thank you so much, Marilyn and David. I really appreciate your advocacy and passion for trees and the trees. Thank you too.
Are we all set on the technical side?
Okay, wonderful. All right, so we're gonna pass the Municipal Reforestation Act, of course. That's why we're all here. But in order to make sure that those trees that will be planted and maintained, we need to make sure that every city and town in Massachusetts has people who are qualified and appropriately trained to take care of those trees. And here in Massachusetts, those are our tree wardens. The law governing tree wardens in Massachusetts is called Chapter 87, and it has been relatively untouched for the past 100 years. As you might imagine, some of the advances in arborist and horticulture and tree care have advanced in the past 100 years. One thing that has happened around trees is the invention of the automobile. Under Chapter 87, if I wantonly cause my horse and buggy to damage a tree along the side of the road, I can be fined $500. If I drive my car into a tree on purpose, there's no fine associated with that. That's fine. You're fine. You can go on your way. That's just one of the examples of some of the updates that we are looking for around Chapter 87. And to talk a little bit about that, we have a couple representatives from the tree warden community. First, I'm going to call up Marc Welch, who's the Deputy Commissioner of Parks and Rec for the City of Newton.
Representative Owens, thank you, Senator Green, and thank you, Senator King, Representative Burns, for myself and my colleague, we're going to speak with you a bit about what we are. We're tree warden. What do we do? So I think as I sit and I listen to the passion that everyone here has shared about their community trees, it's interesting to me. Not only do I very deeply care about trees, I really love the history that's involved with it. And we represent, I'm a tree warden for the city of Newton. My colleague Tom is a tree warden for the town of Brookline. But we also represent a group called the Massachusetts Tree Wardens and Foresters Association. We are the oldest tree care protection organization in the country. When it comes to public trees, our purpose is to care for and disseminate information, make sure that there are professionals taking care of our community trees. And there's a rich history. We're talking about being maybe the first state to require a municipal reforestation program. Well, we were the first state to plant. In this state, in the 1600s, we were the first state to plant a tree for community benefit right here in the city of Boston. We're the first state to have passed laws for the protection of public trees. We're the first state to create a tree warden, person in charge of trees. But the problem is that hasn't really changed very much as far as the rules go since about 1899. There's been a few updates along the way, and Tom will speak to that. But I think it's important that for us to be able to grow and improve our tree canopy in every way, there really does need to be professionals in each community guiding the process. And it doesn't have to be a daunting task. It doesn't matter the size of the community. Trees are an awesome resource, but it does require some solid rules and some solid guidelines and some solid folks managing it and moving that forward.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have, so which one of you is the other Tom Brady? I think he is, yeah, all right. We have Tom Brady, who is the town arborist and tree warden for the town of Brookline. And he'll give a little bit more information about the update to chapter 87.
Always safer to take the technology away from a tree guy. I want to thank the senators and representatives. I want to thank all of their aides that are in the room as well. I can't help but kind of spread my passion for trees when I'm at a podium in front of a like-minded group. And just a couple quick observations before we get started that relate back to that. One is I started my public service career full-time in Watertown in 1996. I was the first full-time tree warden over there. Lives are often connected. The second piece I would share with you is this, is that when we're looking at our infrastructure and our roads and our streets and such things, traffic signals are constructed, hydrants are constructed, granite is installed, trees grow. We have cells, tissues, and pathways. Trees have cells, tissues, and pathways. We breathe, we absorb, we use energy, and we grow. Trees absorb, use nutrients, grow, and take care of energy. There's a lot of similarities. We need to remember this piece of public infrastructure is a biological entity. And it's something that too often I think we forget. And quickly, as I was sitting and listening to David and listening to Marilyn, both folks that I've had the pleasure of working with for a good period of time, I thought, and you mentioned your sons, Rep. Owens. We're at an age in my household where we're doing our first round of college visits. And we were doing a college visit at a urban campus in close proximity to here with my son. And we're sitting in the presentation and they do their presentation. At the end, they put up on the screen. So, and greetings to all those who are with us online. They put up on the screen a aerial view of their campus. And there was a stark line between the community for which I work and the community immediately adjacent. And that's because the folks who did things 60, 70, 80, 120 years ago. So two things struck me. One is that when people say to me, Tom, how do you know if you're doing a good job? Trees evoke passion, let's be honest. So a lot of our discussions evoke passion for folks. I tell them, I know if I'm doing a good job when I come back with my grandson or my granddaughter or my grandpuppy and walk the streets. And hopefully it's just as good now as it is then. But probably made me as proud, if not prouder, is in that presentation in that room with all those people. My son quietly leaned over and said, "Look, Dad, there's your work." And that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. As tree wardens, we're tree people. I'm an arborist by trade. You heard Mark give you a little bit of background. Anyone know where the term tree warden came from? Back when we were trying to become a country, we needed to gather and talk about what we wanted to do. So the folks who didn't want us to do that so much figured out we would meet in houses. So they'd find the house that we were going to meet in, and they'd burn the house down. Problem solved. So they said, "We're fixed that. We're meeting near a tree." So they picked a tree in the Boston Causeway, and they all got to meet out the Boston Causeway. And they fixed that. So we're fixed that. They cut down the tree. So the folks got together and said, "We need someone to make sure this tree does not get cut down. We need to create a warden for this particular tree." And that person's role was to keep an eye on the tree and make sure that it did not get removed. Hence the term tree warden. Now, credit where credit is due. 1899 is when they wrote the law. Overall, you know what? They did pretty well for more than a century. In 1913 was when the first real round of changes came into being. The Massachusetts Tree Wardens and Foresters Association was involved in that quite a bit. As you've heard, times have advanced. So the Tree Wardens has put forth, working with a multitude of stakeholders, a proposal. And in fairness, so you all know, this has been through this process several times. We've never heard an objection to it. But as you all know, this is a busy building. So the issue we have is trying to get it over the finish line. So here's what we're asking for support. And why. Let's talk about why. It hasn't changed since it's 1913. Tree wardens, they can be appointed or elected. What we're asking for is to make sure that tree wardens are qualified. We have a graduated process for that, so it scales with the community. So it's not intended to be an undue burden at all. And in 1913, in fairness, Chapter 87 did a pretty good job of protecting those trees, and it matched the knowledge at the time. But since 1913, when people say, "Well, Tom, if you cut a tree down, sometimes it's just plant a new one." It's okay. When you planted that previous tree, you had a whole lot fewer vehicles. We didn't have nearly as much asphalt. So we didn't have that wonderful thing called liquid salt. I don't know about everyone else in the room, but when it snowed, when I was a kid, I learned how to drive in snow. Now, if we don't have pavement, an hour after the snow is gone, the world's gonna end. So, and that's through liquid salt. Trees don't know the difference, so we get burn marked. So there's a lot more stressors on our trees. We can't assume we can plant the tree and it's gonna be okay. As you heard Marilyn allude to, it takes decades. And as we spoke of earlier, they are biological entities, and as they face that challenge. We break essentially our proposal into three broad categories. And that is, let's make some minor changes. You've heard about the anecdote about the horse and buggy running into the tree versus the vehicle. That's real. So if you go strictly by Chapter 87, there is no mechanism for that. And as our vehicles get larger and faster, and they tend to bounce off things more, that happens more and more than you would think. The second we have is to bring the standards up to current times. And that is Chapter 87 that says a public shade tree can only be removed one of two ways. And that is either through a public hearing process, and if someone objects in writing, the tree remains, unless and until it's either overridden by the chief elected official in the community, or it's deemed a hazard by the tree warden. The law currently says that a tree can be deemed a hazard if it is a hazard to those traveling within the public right of way, the actual legal terminology. You can interpret any tree to deem a hazard to those traveling within the public right of way. Our feeling is that's much too broad. So we're looking to bring in industry standards. There are accepted industry standards in terms of what does and what does not constitute a risk or a hazard tree. And one of the key pieces is we're here today because Chapter 87, unlike many regulations that Maryland helped to develop and was involved in, if you look at wetlands protection in Massachusetts, which is my other half of my job, conservation, we have quite literally hundreds of pages of regulation that tell us how to administer the law. If you look at contaminated sites, you have literally thousands of pages of contamination, how to interpret the law. If you look at mass fisheries and wildlife, you have regulation that tells you how to interpret the law. Chapter 87 does not have regulation. So that means as science changes and as things advance, we need to come back and burden the legislature with helping us keep up with science. Whereas if we have regulation, it would allow us to, through an appropriate public hearing process, modify the requirements as science advances. So that's the third piece we're looking for. I just talked about public shade trees. I just want to be clear. When we talked about the trees along the streets and the Municipal Reforestation Act, which is a terrific idea to advance as well. Public shade trees are all those trees located within the public right of way. If you're located legally within the public right of way, you are encumbered or controlled by Chapter 87 protocols. So when you're driving down these streets and you're driving up and down these ways, all those trees are controlled by the tree warden for each community. There's 351 cities and towns in our fine Commonwealth. There's 351 tree wardens. And the power that they invested in the tree wardens in 1899 and brought up the code in 1910 are significant. Our jobs are ones that evoke passion, and we love what we do. Mark and I are both certified arborists. We both have degrees in arboriculture. Most of our colleagues do, many of them do. But with that comes significant responsibility. So I manage roughly 13,000 trees on my streets, 60,000 in active spaces. I have had multiple instances of damage. I've had incidences of injury, and we had incredibly tragic death during a storm event as well. So what we're asking for is some support in putting tools and mechanisms in place that will allow us as public officials to have things at our disposal that will help us appropriately manage this resource. So it's here for future generations, and so that we can manage that risk. If you look around right now, what's going on, we're all aware of it. You're all in the room. I don't have to preach to the choir. There are clearly changes occurring around us. And among those, we're seeing the storm events are becoming more extreme. I think rarely it seems to have nice summer rains anymore. It seems to be severe thunderstorm or nothing. We have Asian longhorn beetle in Worcester, which had a decimating effect. We have emerald ash borer that's around now. We have spotted lanternfly that's around now. We have an increase in the insect and disease problems because of the influencing factors. But above all that, when you put that all together and you think about biological beings that these trees are, we're asking for your support to help us put some tools and protocols in place that will help us more effectively manage this resource, which will help it be here for the long term, reduce risk in the present day, and allow for better resources for us to maintain the resource. And it's House Bill 2094 and Senate Bill 1280, and we ask for your support, and I thank you for your time.
We'll close out with some a little bit of time for questions from folks in the room. I do want to point out one thing about the update to the Chapter 87 that came up late last year. In Somerville, a developer illegally cut down a number of mature street trees, and the residents of the city were surprised that they had no mechanism to get the developer to pay more than a $500 fine for each tree. And those of you who have planted trees know that $500 does not go very far in planting. It doesn't even rent the backhoe to plant a tree. But that number was set again in either 1899 or 1913, when that was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money, but certainly compared to the price of a mature tree, does not cover it. It was only through the good-hearted and nature of the developer who wanted to continue to do business in Somerville that they were able to get an agreement, but there was no legal authority to replace those trees apart from the fine. So with that, I'd like to, if there's any questions in the room, because we're running just about to 11, but if there are any questions from folks in the room, happy to take them. Yes.
One of the things that I know is incorporated in this bill, Marilyn and I talked about is the preference for native trees. Could you please speak to why that's there and why it's important?
Sure, I'll hand that over to Marilyn if you want to talk about that. But the question was about a preference for native trees and why that's important. Let me see if I can I take this out? I can. Look at this.
I don't know if I'll be on screen, but that's okay. The thing about native trees is that they are part of the ecosystem that birds and insects need. And so if you bring in trees from abroad, often they bring insects that are pests that our trees are not used to. And then our trees get sick and die. And if you have native trees, they will attract other beneficial insects that help protect the trees. So the trees are just part, and that's why this book is so terrific. Doug Hollamy and Peter Wallenben are like leaders in the field of having people understand this is all like a network. The trees are part of a vast system of microorganisms and other fungi and other beings, and that it's really important for them to be in a community that they feel at home in. Now, we're definitely the idea of native is gonna change because of climate change. Trees are moving north, and how that's gonna work out, we don't really know. We don't know if the insects that the birds depend on are gonna move north as well. The timing is off. We are in uncertain territory, but certainly we can start by planting trees that are really happy to be in New England. And we're really lucky in Massachusetts and New England because we have more trees now than we did 100 years ago because we're being reforested. And it's just really important for us to preserve that legacy of those mature trees that have been here for 100 years. And Tom was so right about it. You really, I think I have a slogan that said, he who plants or she who plants a tree and knowing she will never sit in the shade of it knows the meaning of life. And that's a really powerful takeaway.
Okay, yeah.
Hi, one of the things, I'm from the city of Newton, I'm a city councilor there, and we have a big problem with gas leaks. And gas leaks are a big threat to trees, and I'm wondering how this stuff might impact that.
Okay, so the question for those of you online was about how this bill might impact the damage that gas leaks do to trees. And one of you wants to take that. Marilyn, okay.
As I said in my opening remarks, the reason I'm sitting here today is because I was so mad about the trees being killed in Brookline. This is outrageous. My first meeting in the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, they told me 150 trees have been killed by gas leaks. And I was like, we got to do something about that. So they say, go join the gas leaks allies. And so here I am. But so it's ever present in people's minds to deal with that. And the tree advisory committee will require cities and towns to check tree pits before they put trees in the ground. But I also think what's really important from this bill is to get a big movement among people who understand the profound impact that trees can make on our lives and be a political force to stop the gas leaks. And of course, the gas transition allies say the best way to stop the gas leaks is to don't have gas anymore, you do something else to heat your house.
Marilyn, talk about 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so just there is another bill that's not before you today, but will be before you next week at 1 o'clock in this very room. It will feature clean heat and a bill that Rep. Armeni filed called interveners in utility work, but I think we all call it empowering municipal voices. And really what it does is take complaints and information that I got from Allison and Lisa Olney and Ellen Goldberg and my friends from the multi-town gas leak initiative to have a system to hold gas companies accountable when they come into cities and towns and dig up the streets and don't fix the leaks. And Newton right now is in a big crisis about gas leaks. So I think that, we're moving on to look at alternatives to gas to heat our homes. But meanwhile, today we have gas leaks that need to be dealt with and in an effective way.
I just add a brief comment to that. I can't remember which one of you said it takes a community of people who might not work together. I think that's true. When we talk about trees, we're engaging people in thinking about the interconnectedness of trees to infrastructure, to public health. And unfortunately, trees are a canary in a coal mine when it comes to gas leaks, right? You smell it or you see it, but otherwise gas leaks are invisible unless you see a tree that's dying. So I think there's a natural synergy here. I'm not sure this bill exactly has a solution to that, but I think we're building a coalition, like Marilyn said.
Actually, that other bill that 3137, it has a provision in there that gas companies that kill trees have to pay for it. So it actually specifically in there saying enough of us. They give you like a penny on a 50 cents on the dollar, 10 cents on the dollar for killing your trees. That's good money. And they claim that trees are not property. The DPU thinks that trees are not property. I mean, they didn't know this lost one.
Trees have anything, right?
All right, so we are at 11, but I think a bunch of us are gonna stick around. We're gonna end the formal program, I think. Just in respect to everybody's time. But I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank particularly my co-filers on behalf of Rep. Armini and Senator Crean. Really appreciate you all coming out here today. I think that folks are going to be milling about for a little bit in the room. We had almost 100 people online, so thank you for the online. We just had that round of applause. Thanks for sticking with us today, and I really appreciate everybody's passion on this. And with your help, we will get it to the next step. So thank you so much.
Oh.